The title of this video is Meetings. Now, in the workplace, you'll do meetings. Small organisations, large organisations. You cannot escape meetings. The larger the organisation, the more the meetings. Oftentimes in organisations, the meetings are just there to confirm what everybody knows. It's those periods of time between meetings. If you have back-to-back meetings all day, you may have 5 minutes between meetings to have a conversation with somebody. And those conversations between meetings is where the actual information exchange actually takes place. A meeting, particularly in government, is there to confirm what everybody has already agreed prior to the meeting. It's not to surprise anybody. It's not for people to, come across new information, really. It's for them to share that they've all understood it, to explain that they're good with the direction, and to give their reasons why. But you need to do the work before the meeting to get that shared understanding. Meetings are really important. If you're managing a group, then you have the meeting to manage, potentially. You may be leading it or you may be supporting it. There's what happens before the meeting and there's what happens after the meeting. If you've got a meeting recurring, you're only going to want to keep doing that meeting if there's action happening in between meetings. So at the start of every meeting, you should always be saying, this is what happened after last meeting. This is what was done. Allocate topics in the meeting by time. Work out who's going to say what and when. Who needs to follow who. Because the order of topics is really important. If you get the order wrong, somebody might talk first, but then it might turn out later that they should have followed somebody else. So if you're organising a meeting, you need to be really important that you've got the order right. Do invite new people to your meetings. Don't just always be meeting with the same group all the time. You need new ideas, you need fresh ideas. Always be looking for new actions. The purpose of the meeting is for something to happen, always. Do not meet just for the sake of it. Always have a purpose, always have a list of items, list of speakers, be organised, be professional, and by the end of the meeting, know what those new actions are. You can then circulate those actions to the group and make progress based on whatever topic your group is interested in. Now, as a team, it also helps to have a weekly update, particularly if members in the team are working in different areas. One useful structure I've found for this is based on the Agile methodology. This is where you have sections broken up on a board and everybody sits around the board. You have a list of things from last week that you've done, that you've achieved. This was the progress. You have the plan for next week. You've got the past, you've got the future. You can say you need help with particular things. Now this can be help from managers, help from visitors to this group. It also helps to put how you're feeling down there. People sometimes will say, I've got plans for a great holiday, I'm really excited. And people generally share their happy things. And in a workplace which can be fairly stressful, getting those happy things out shares a little bit of that happiness around. So that's surprisingly a fairly powerful way of bringing a group together. Just have that simple discipline of getting together at a frequency of a week and sharing that update. It doesn't have to take a long time. Now in the Agile software world, the rules are you've got a certain amount of time to do this, typically 15 minutes, depending on the size of the group. Everybody speaks for a set amount of time, breaking up the time evenly. And you've got that set amount of time, everybody stands up, and then everybody gets out. There's no sitting down, there's no chance for chit-chat. You just get there, share the information, and you're out of there. One-on-one meetings with your manager are critical because their perception of you is so important. From the supervisor's point of view, they want to know how you've progressed against actions. If you've met before, you'll have a number of actions that you're supposed to have followed up. You want to be able to tell them how you've progressed against that. A supervisor may have a number of issues. Some of them you may be able to help with. So getting them to talk through some of their issues can help them out. Even if it's just moral support, sometimes it helps to get a view on what your manager's actually seeing. A supervisor will be addressing various risks, looking for particular fires that they need to put out, and you can be a part of the solution to help them. You need to remember that your supervisor is in HR, is in human resources. They're not an engineer. Well, they may be an engineer, but if they're supervising you, their job is human resources. And that's a whole discipline in its own right. Okay? You need to be really aware that just because you're an engineer, they don't manage you like a product. You're both people. They have hopes, aspirations, fears, dreams, good days, bad days, all those sorts of things. The supervisor is generally focused on the next step. What's the next actions? What are you going to do after you've had this meeting in the next week, in the next day? How are you contributing? This is an opportunity for you to showcase your contribution to the organisation. So as somebody who's being supervised, you want to explain how you're progressing against actions. If there's a problem, you do not pass the problem up the chain unless you can absolutely not avoid it. What you need to do is to put your supervisor in the driver's seat and say, here's the issue. Talk about it very quickly and say, here are 3 possible solutions, A, B, and C. Talk about the pros and cons of each solution and get your supervisor to make a call or think of another option. But don't go to a supervisor with your problems. Their job is to make decisions about options, not to think through what those options might be. It's a really important point, one that I was told a long time ago, and it's really so important. Request approval for things, funding, equipment, all kinds of things you're going to need approval for. Leave even, and help. Sometimes you're going to need help. You also want to discuss what you've contributed to the organisation, both in terms of the short, medium and long term. You need to always be convincing your supervisor that you are worth having around. You have to constantly be promoting and selling yourself to some extent. You cannot just be focusing in on the nitty-gritty and focusing on the technical details. You need to actually promote yourself. If you're not doing this, if you're not visible, if you're not transparent, when the company runs out of money, who do you think they're going to look at getting rid of? Okay? If you're going to survive as a professional, you need to be so careful that you're actually putting forward the best possible version of yourself. Finally, the supervisor needs to assign what those actions are, and the supervisor needs to take note of those actions and talk about any possible interactions or engagement that needs to take place in order for those actions to be achieved. If you have a large group meeting, be prepared. Go there always with 3 things to say. Now, if you speak late in the meeting, later ideas are supposed to be better than early ones. If you speak early, then it doesn't really matter so much what you say. So try and speak earlier than later. You must have a voice. If you go to a meeting and don't talk, you haven't contributed. You've added no value. Sometimes that requires speaking over people. Some of you may be respectful and you've been brought up to wait till somebody's finished talking to talk, but you must have a voice. Your voice must be heard. If you go to a large meeting, people may be talking over each other all the time. There may be no gaps to get in. You just have to sometimes jump in and repeat your point, repeat your point, repeat your point, till somebody else runs out of steam and you have the floor. And then you've got to go in with what you've prepared. Part of the way to prepare for such all-in brawls is to have a prior discussion with somebody else. Test your ideas with them. Ask them about what they're planning to say. Have a few discussions like that, and you can be prepared for these sorts of meetings. And then follow up afterwards. It's really important, because sometimes you go to a large meeting and somebody will commit to some action, and then, funnily enough, after the meeting, nothing happens. So make sure that if somebody says they're going to do something, that there's an email to confirm it, there's a reminder put in the calendar, and that somebody's going to check in to ensure that that action's taken place. If you need an organisation to change, and it's critical, like it's around safety or it's around risk, do not believe that people are naturally going to follow through. They may have all sorts of things going on. Assume it isn't their fault that they're absolutely being crushed with work, but you have to get that commitment and you have to follow through. Make sure it happens, because in certain situations, it's absolutely critical. You need to focus on your performance. You don't know everything. You can constantly be looking for areas in which you can improve. Now, organisations may pay for training. They may help you to improve. And if they do that, It's always good to show them that you're applying what they've paid for, if you can, so that they know that they're not just sending you on a 3-day conference, you eat some good food, and you don't bring anything back. It's really just a paid holiday. Try and demonstrate, if you go on training, that you're actually bringing back something to add value. Ask your boss what you can improve. Don't be afraid to ask for feedback. Now, Australia doesn't have a particularly strong culture of feedback. There are other cultures which is much stronger. So bosses may never give you feedback unless you're actually in a performance review. Sometimes that can be too late because you might want to actually find out what you can change a few months before the performance review. So check in periodically with your boss and have mini performance reviews. Ask how you're traveling. Ask your boss what you can improve. Now, when you're in a room with a lot of people, you need to read the mood. Some of them may be stressed, angry, anxious, and fearful. Okay, it's not just about delivering the information. It's about being sensitive to the environment that you're in. If people are stressed, if they're anxious, they may not be ready to hear things. And if they're not ready, don't say them. You need to know when to give information. Executives are extremely good at this because their key questions around timing. Why now? They're always thinking about why now? Why should this happen now? Why should this be talked about now? And what next? So watch the way executives do it and learn from them. Keeping track of your daily wins and your plans, your weekly plans, that always gives you something to say and something to fall back on. Keep that in mind. Have a read of it before you go to a meeting. Print it out if you need to. But have something in the back pocket that you can always say. The other thing too is some people always ask the same types of questions. They might work in a particular field. Pay attention to those questions. If you can predict the questions, it makes life a lot easier. You're prepared, you're ready to go. Take notes. Listen. Don't just focus on your own area. You're interacting with people from lots of different areas, different levels of expertise. Really pay attention and try and learn what are the key sorts of things that they're thinking about. And reflect on meetings afterwards. Discuss them with colleagues. Talk about alternatives. You can learn a lot just by testing ideas with people. Test your observations. You may miss things. You may see things differently to your colleagues. It's worth having that conversation.